My client stood there in the doorway. He had his gun openly on his hip. And he said, I will talk to you, but I will talk to you right here. And the police said, no, you're going to come out and you're going to talk to us. And he said, well, do you have a warrant? Handled this very calmly and without, yelling. And the police said, no, we don't have a warrant, but you're going to come and talk to us. Right now, we're going to pull you out of the house. They tried to pull him out of the house. He held himself, and the police tackled him into the house. This is an older gentleman in his 70s, no criminal record, horrible situation. They tasered him multiple times. They actually took his own gun off of him and put it to the back of his head, all on body camera video. Thank God for the body cameras. And they ended up charging him with felonious assault and resisting arrest on all these police officers. We took that to circuit court, and because the police screwed up, because they entered that house without a warrant, and he actually exercised his rights, we checked all the boxes. He did absolutely everything right. That entire case got thrown out. Welcome back to the Liberty Lawyer Podcast. My name is Nick Somberg. I'm your host. I'm a criminal defense attorney from the state of Michigan, jury trial attorney, and this podcast is about your constitutional rights and some crazy cases that I deal with out there in the legal world. This episode is going to break down your legal rights so you can deal with police encounters and get out of the situation or put yourself in the best position to not make things worse. First, it's important to understand the backbone of all this, and that's our Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment is the backbone of your protection against the government. They can't just invade your home, your car, your person, your pockets, your backpack without a valid reason. So let's start with the basics. You're just walking down the street, you're by yourself, and the police come up to you and they ask you your name. They ask you if you're an ID. They ask you to search your backpack. Now, the famous case to establish this is a United States Supreme Court called Terry v. Ohio. Now, the police must have at least reasonable, articulable basis to stop you. They need to suspect you of a crime. When you're walking down the street, you have no obligation to provide an ID. You have no obligation to consent to a search. So you can ask an officer, what crime do you suspect me of? And if an officer does not suspect you of any crime or can't articulate any basis to do so, you should be free to go. Now, you don't just want to run off because you don't want to escalate a situation and you don't want a police officer to feel like you're resisting. So you want to ask the officer, am I free to go? And if you're not, he needs to have a reason to hold you there. If they don't have a reason to hold you there at that very moment, even if you had something on you you weren't supposed to, if you're doing something wrong, that evidence could be completely thrown out in court if they broke the Constitution to temporarily detain you or search you. So an example of this, I had a client one time and he was leaving a house party and the police just thought he looked suspicious and stopped him and took his backpack and searched him. And it didn't matter what they found in that backpack because they didn't have enough cause to stop him in the first place, let alone search him without a warrant. So we were able to get that case entirely thrown out and everything that they found excluded from evidence. So it's important to know your rights, and if the police make a mistake, they can completely ruin their case for the government. Another big thing in Michigan is open carry. So in Michigan, you can open carry a firearm simply because there's no law prohibiting you from doing so. And there's people that do First Amendment and Second Amendment audits to make sure that the state and the police know the Constitution. And open carrying a firearm alone in public, now there's a lot of exceptions and maybe places that will get more police attention than others, but that is not reasonable suspicion of a crime. It is completely legal to open carry. So if you're carrying it in a safe position, properly holstered, or people do carry long rifles, which might get you some more attention, but people do carry those. That in and of itself, without more, is not reasonable suspicion of a crime. It's no reason to be stopped and no reason to be searched. We talked about what to say if a police officer stops you. Am I being detained? What crime do you suspect me of? Am I free to go? Am I under arrest? Now, those are the letter of the law, and that's to protect your constitutional rights, especially nowadays when a lot of things are recorded either on body camera or by a police officer's squad car. It's good to have those evidence and those lines drawn, because as soon as you ask if you're being detained, he has to either say yes or no. And if he says yes and doesn't have the reason right there, things can be excluded. You never want to lie to the police because you can get in big trouble. And what I tell people is the best way to not lie to the police is just to not speak to the police. You also have the Fifth Amendment right to not respond and to not incriminate yourself. There are certain exceptions, like if you're driving, you have to provide an ID and give your name, but otherwise, you don't have to talk about what you're doing, where you're coming from, where you're going. And the goal is to get out of the situation without being charged in the first place. It's never fun to go to court and have to pay a lawyer and deal with the system. So let's talk about vehicles. When you're operating a vehicle on a public road, you have a lowered expectation of privacy. So that's because, one, you're on a road that the government paid for, the taxpayers paid for. You have a driver's license that you had to apply for. You're out in the public. People can see you. You're operating a vehicle. So the police actually do not need a search warrant to search your car. If you get pulled over, they only need probable cause. They don't have to have a search warrant. And you can get pulled over by two ways. They either have to, one, have reasonable suspicion that a misdemeanor has occurred, so a lower crime, not a felony, just a misdemeanor, or they have to actually witness you commit a traffic offense. Traffic offenses are lower than crimes, or lower than misdemeanors. If they see you speed, blow a red light, if you don't have your tags proper, anything that is a civil infraction that you could go to court for, that's going to be grounds for them to pull over and stop the vehicle right then and there. Once a vehicle's stopped, the police are allowed to do certain things. They can ask you for your driver's license. They can ask you for your proof of insurance and your registration. You have to provide those things. And it's not a good point to fight with the police over that, because it's just going to escalate, because you have to provide those. And the goal is to end the encounter and leave there as soon as possible with all your freedoms in place. The smell of marijuana from a vehicle is no longer probable cause to search, because marijuana is legal in Michigan, so the possession's not a crime. Now, you can't smoke marijuana and then drive a vehicle, and the law says that you can't drive a vehicle up to 24 hours after you smoke or use marijuana. And people get in trouble because of this, because they say, an officer says, have you smoked marijuana? And somebody who feels fine will say, well, I smoked earlier today, or I smoked last night before I went to bed. And that is actually admitting to a DUI in the state of Michigan. It's the same thing as driving drunk, which makes no sense at all. But making these admissions, again, can get you into a world of trouble. So let's talk about what a search warrant is. A search warrant is a document that's issued by a magistrate or a judge that says that the police have probable cause, which is the reasonable belief based on facts that a crime has been or will occur, and evidence of the crime will be found. The search warrant must detail the exact place to be searched and the items to be seized. So there's a lot of situations where the police don't need a search warrant. Like in the law, there's always exceptions, there's always double exceptions, and there's going to be a lot of situations where the police don't need a warrant. And if you ask for them, it's just going to ask for one. It's just going to escalate the situation. The good acronym from law school is Escapist, and we're going to go through each one of those. The first one is for exigent circumstances. Exigent circumstances is like an emergency situation. That's the police hear a woman screaming behind a door, and they need to kick the door in and go and save somebody's life. That is when evidence is disappearing. So they're in a drug bust, and they hear, the toilet flushing, or somebody's throwing something into the water. The police are allowed to act immediately to save somebody and to preserve evidence. And the last exigent circumstance is fleeing felon. So if the police see a felony happen and that person starts running, they don't need to go back to their car and get on the phone and get a search warrant to go and stop that person and detain them. They can act right away without hesitation. The S in Escapist is for search incident to lawful arrest. So if you get arrested for any reason, you can be searched. Your vehicle can be searched. And people need to understand that. If you're driving and you don't have a valid driver's license, that's a crime, at least here in the state of Michigan. And just for that small crime, you have opened yourself up to be completely searched, instant to lawful arrest. So they can arrest you on a misdemeanor and bring you to jail. They can search your person. They can search the vehicle. That's for officer safety. It's, if they can bring you to jail, it means they can prevent anything from entering that jail. So the Supreme Court's decided that you can be searched at that point in your pockets and everything. The C of Escapist, and this is the worst one. If you do this one, your attorney's going to have a really hard time beating this and defending you, and that is consent. Now, you can always consent. You can say, yes, officer, search my vehicle, search my backpack, go in my pockets. If you knowingly consent to a search, the police can do it. You have outright waived your Fourth Amendment right. And unlike your Miranda rights, where if the police want to interrogate you and get information from you, and they have to read you your Miranda constitutional rights that to a lawyer, that everything you say can and will be used against you, they don't need to do this with a search. They can walk up to you and say, hey, bud, let's look in your backpack. And if you say, okay, they've done nothing wrong, you have consented. That's why it's important for you to watch this video and know your rights to protect yourself in these situations. And consent must be given freely. It can't be coerced. So there's a lot of examples of this. If a police officer says, search your backpack or I'm taking you to jail right now, or if it's worse, let me search you or I'm going to hurt you, that is not a consented to search. So even if you did, your lawyer has a fighting chance at that point. Consent can be revoked at any time. If you give consent, and that's how the police officer started his search, and you say stop, he has to stop. Unless, of course, he has probable cause at that time. He can keep going. But this is very important. A lot of people, they feel like they want to help their situation. They feel like, oh, if I'm just nice, if I just cooperate, this officer said that he'll make things better. And that is extremely rarely the case. The police officer's job, it's not to serve and protect you. The police officer's actual job is to collect evidence. They are trained evidence collectors and expert witnesses. They are allowed to lie to you. They are allowed to manipulate you in your emotions. They do the good cop, bad cop. They might have somebody who's really nice, somebody who is your age or relatable. They'll team up a man with a man on a man, a young girl with a woman, maybe someone the same color as you, just somebody you'll open up with. And they'll have another person acting mean and crazy. So you think you're helping yourself by talking to the nice person. Oh, it's okay to search my backpack. But 99% of the time, unless you are extremely innocent, you're only going to make your situation worse. If the police are asking you questions, if they want to search you, it's generally because they don't have enough to arrest you, to get their charges. They need more from you. And a lot of times they need your consent or a confession. In Escapist is for the automobile exception. This is a huge one. So when you're on a public road, the police officers don't need a warrant to search you if it gets to that point. All they need is probable cause. Getting pulled over in the first place has its own set of rules. The police either need to have reasonable suspicion of at least a misdemeanor. So you committed a crime, you're leaving the scene of a crime. They have to have reasonable suspicion that you have committed a crime or that there will be evidence of a crime in the vehicle, or they have to see you commit a traffic offense. So that's anything that's rolling a stop sign, speeding, not having your tags on your car proper, having a tail light out. That's why a lot of people get pulled over. Any one of these things will initiate a traffic stop. Now, once they have you pulled over, the police are allowed to do a lot of things. One, if they ask you for your driver's license, you have to provide it to them, as well as your registration, as well as your proof of insurance. This is only for the driver. This is important because there's a lot of times where people are driving with their friends, passengers. If you're a passenger in a vehicle, unless you're doing something separately illegal, the police have no business talking to you. You do not have to provide an ID, similar to if you're just walking down the street by yourself. They have to have probable cause against you specifically, if you're not the driver, to even have to provide an identification in the first place. And it's important to know the police can ask you to step out of the vehicle for any reason, and that's for officer safety. And this is something there are people, they don't comply and they escalate the situation a lot worse. If the police ask you to step out of the vehicle, do so. Make sure you shut your door behind you. That's very importantly. If you leave your door open, that is a whole nother set of problems. But you want to comply, you want to get out of the vehicle and just listen to the officer at that point. The P in Escapist is for plain view doctrine. If the police see evidence of a crime in plain view, they don't need to go get a search warrant to go and grab that evidence. Now, the illegality of what they see must be apparent on its face. So if it's a pile of cocaine on a table, that's going to be enough for the police officer. The illegality of it is clear by plain view. The officer also needs to be lawfully present. So if an officer went through a door into a house without a search warrant and then he saw something on the table, that doesn't count. If he sees it through a window, well, maybe. But the officer needs to be legally present, and the evidence, what he is observing, the illegality needs to be obvious or clearly in plain view to go around this warrant exception. The I in Escapist is an easy one. This is for inventory search. If the police can tow your vehicle, they can search your vehicle. And this is one to protect your property so you can't claim, hey, I lost 10 grand that was in there that maybe was there or not. This is for safety of the officer and where they're bringing a vehicle to a tow yard. You know, they want to make sure it's not a bomb that's going to blow up while it's being towed. And it's to also protect the police from claims. And again, that kind of goes to your own property. The second S in Escapist is for special needs. And this is for very rare circumstances or special circumstances. For example, if you're at an international border, the police can search you without a warrant. If you're a student at a junior high or a high school, the police can search your locker. It's a huge one to know because, again, you're a student at a school. The Supreme Court decided that you have a lower expectation of privacy. So the school officials or the police or the government actors are going to be able to search that locker without a search warrant. The T in Escapist is for the Terry stop and frisk. And this is the one we've already been over. When you're walking down the street, when the police officer asks to search your backpack, your person, they're going to need a warrant for that. But it's for a brief pat down of the outside of you if they have reasonable suspicion that you are armed and dangerous. And that's just for a brief pat down. They can't go into your pockets. They can't go into your backpack. But that's our final exception of the search warrant requirement. There are many areas where the police don't need a search warrant or even reasonable suspicion to search. First one's going to be your bank records. The police can go and get that without a warrant or without cause. The open fields doctrine. So you're protected near the curtilage of your house. It means everything right up to the house. And we're going to go into that. But if you live on 10 acres, the police can trespass, can go into your acreage. Now, if it's fenced, that's different. But the police can walk around where any person would be able to. And that's because you have a lower expectation of privacy. If you have 10 acres, 100 acres, way out there. But they don't need a warrant to go and walk around and find evidence of a crime. Big one is garbage at the curb. People throw things away. There's a lot of cases where the police have suspicion. They do whatever you put at the curb, that's considered abandoned. You don't have an expectation of privacy in your trash you put at the curb. The police will pull it. They'll find a little baggie of something, test it, find drugs. That's cause to get a search warrant and raid your entire house. So be careful what you put at the curb. Odors. You don't have an expectation of privacy to your smells, right? So if you smell bad, you have no expectation of privacy. And where this comes into play is for dogs on an automobile. The police can run a dog around your car without cause, okay? Now, they can't delay your traffic stop. They can't delay to get a dog to come there unless they have actual cause. But if they have the dog ready, they can walk it around your vehicle. They don't need to have probable cause to do that. They don't need a warrant to do that. And if a dog hits, then they're going to get that probable cause, and then they can search your vehicle at that point. Aerial surveillance, if they have a helicopter, if they have drones, they can use that nowadays anywhere where they're in the public airspace. Now, they can't use infrared. They can't see through your house or use any technology like that without a warrant. They can do it with a warrant. That came into play with marijuana grows in Michigan. That was not so much in play anymore, but they would need a warrant to see through a wall. But anywhere in the public airspace, if they can look down and see it, they don't need a warrant to do that. The last one, this is huge. Be careful who your friends are, because communicating with a third party is not protected. If you tell your friend that you committed a crime, heck, your friend could set you up. You could be on the phone with somebody, and your friend could know the police are listening, and that's not protected at all. So you have no expectation of privacy to things that come out of your own mouth. So be careful who your friends are and keep things to yourself. Now, we talked about all the places where you have a lower expectation of privacy or the police don't even need a warrant. But now let's talk about the strongest area where you have the most rights, and that's your home. And our founding fathers decided that your home is your castle, whether it's a tent, whether it's a trailer that you live in or a big mansion. You have the same expectation of privacy, and the police are absolutely going to need, above probable cause, they're going to need an actual search warrant to enter your home. The ways they can get around this, though, are one, those exigent circumstances we talked about. So if you're flushing evidence or if they hear somebody scream like they're being killed, the police are going to enter your home. Be careful who your friends are. If you have a girlfriend, a roommate, anybody who lives in the home can give consent. So if you're standing there saying no, somebody's standing there saying yes, as long as they have consent from one of the parties, they're allowed to walk in there. Even if you're not home, you could have a girlfriend, you could have someone who's mad at you and say, yeah, come in and look at these guns, look at these drugs. That's going to be completely allowed, and they're not going to need a search warrant if somebody's there consenting. Now, what you should do, it's always best really to just talk through the door, because once you open the door, you are literally opening the door to a world of problems. But if you do open the door, you want to stay in the threshold, so that you don't want to go forward through the threshold door and ask the police, do you have a warrant? There's actually some funny doormats. I got one in my office. My doormat says, come back with a warrant, because they would need it to search my office. We have an expectation of privacy here. I have a case right now where a 74-year-old man held his ground and held his rights, and he was suspected of pulling a gun on a neighbor, and this is a crazy situation where he was absolutely in the right. But my client stood there in the doorway. He had his gun openly on his hip, and he said, I will talk to you, but I will talk to you right here. And the police said, no, you're going to come out and you're going to talk to us. And he said, well, do you have a warrant? Did the right thing and handled this very calmly and without, yelling. And the police said, no, we don't have a warrant, but you're going to come and talk to us right now. We're going to pull you out of the house. And he stood there, and the police ended up they tried to pull him out of the house. He held himself, and the police tackled him into the house. This is an older gentleman in his 70s, no criminal record, horrible situation. They tasered him multiple times. They actually took his own gun off of him and put it to the back of his head, all on body camera video. Thank God for the body cameras. And they ended up charging him with felonious assault and resisting arrest on all these police officers. We took that to circuit court, and because the police screwed up, because they entered that house without a warrant, and he actually exercised his rights, we checked all the boxes, he did absolutely everything right, that entire case got thrown out. Today, we covered the key rights that you have under the Fourth Amendment, the exceptions, and how to protect yourself. Remember, when dealing with the police, even if you're right, you don't want to escalate the situation. Always stay calm, know your rights, and don't be afraid to assert them. And remember, do so wisely, because even if you're right, you don't want to escalate a situation. And if all else fails, the best thing for you to possibly do is ask for a lawyer, because right then and there, the police are no longer allowed to continue questioning you. It's the best thing you can do to protect your rights. Thank you for watching the Liberty Lawyer Podcast. If you like this episode, please subscribe, share, hit the notification button, and we'll see you next time.